Most men go through life unaware of a fundamental truth about women, one they rarely discover until they've experienced heartbreak, betrayal, or confusion that leaves them questioning everything. It often comes as a shock to realize that women do not live in the same version of reality that men do. Not because they're evil or foolish, but because their perception of the world is deeply rooted in emotion rather than logic. This emotional lens shapes how they interpret events, conversations, and even their own memories. What a man experiences as a clear and logical sequence of facts can be completely rewritten in a woman's mind based on how she felt at the time or how she feels now. This isn't manipulation in the traditional sense. It's a different internal compass. She could love you deeply today and truly mean it. But if her feelings shift, if her emotional atmosphere changes, that love can dissolve almost instantly. To her, it makes perfect sense. Her emotional state has changed, so her truth has changed. That's why so many men are blindsided when a woman who once claimed undying love suddenly leaves or disconnects without warning. In her emotional reality, what she once said isn't a lie, it's simply no longer true. And when you try to hold her to her words, she looks at you like you're the one being unreasonable. Because to her, the past doesn't matter if her present feelings don't match it. This is why logic rarely works in an emotional argument. You're trying to anchor a moving ship with a stationary post. It's not going to hold. Until a man understands this dynamic, he will constantly feel lost in relationships, confused by sudden shifts, drained by emotional highs and lows, and unable to understand why nothing he says or does seems to truly matter. When a woman begins to fall for you, what often feels like deep, genuine love is frequently something far more fragile: emotional projection. She's not necessarily falling in love with you as you are, but rather with an image she's created in her mind, a version of you that fits her dreams, desires, and fantasies. She sees your potential, how you make her feel in the moment, and builds a story around it. She fills in the blanks with ideals, not facts. In those early stages, it feels powerful. You might think, she really gets me, or this is different. But what's happening is that she's building emotional castles on clouds, and you're the placeholder for the prince. The problem arises when reality begins to surface. She starts to see your flaws, your humanity, the ordinary pieces of you that don't match the fantasy. Slowly, the disillusionment begins. Her enthusiasm fades. Her warmth turns into confusion or distance, and you're left wondering, what changed? The truth is, nothing changed. You just never met the real version of her feelings. You were interacting with a temporary version built on dreams, not on who you actually are. That's why you'll often hear contradictory statements from her. She might say she wants a strong, assertive man, but also one who's soft and emotionally vulnerable. She wants a man to lead, but also one who lets her take control. These aren't logical contradictions to her, they make emotional sense because they satisfy different emotional cravings at different times. But to you, they sound impossible to fulfill. And that's the trap. You try to live up to an expectation that keeps shifting. The more you try to match her fantasy, the more you lose your authenticity, until she no longer recognizes what she thought she wanted because it never really existed in the first place. Social media has poured gasoline on the emotional chaos that already existed in modern relationships. Women are constantly bombarded with images of perfect couples, lavish lifestyles, over-the-top romantic gestures, and filtered versions of love that don't exist in real life. These curated highlight reels set impossible standards, not just for what love should look like, but how it should feel every single day. The man who shows up consistently, works hard, and provides stability is now measured against 30-second TikToks of men flying their girlfriends to Paris or proposing with flash mobs and drones. She's comparing your reality to a fantasy, and the fantasy always wins because it was designed to. The danger is, she doesn't even know she's doing it. To her, it feels like a genuine sense of dissatisfaction, like something is missing. And culture tells her to trust that feeling, no matter how irrational it is. She's told that her emotions are sacred, that they're indicators of truth, rather than fleeting experiences. So if she feels bored, it means the relationship is wrong. If she feels uncertain, it means something must be off. Instead of questioning those feelings or investigating their root, she validates them with images and narratives online. And now, even minor discomfort gets mistaken for incompatibility. You try to remind her of what's real, you show her the effort, the time, the loyalty, but it doesn't land. Her feelings override the facts. Even worse, if you try to bring her back to reality, you risk being labeled as controlling or emotionally unavailable. But what's really happening is this. She's so immersed in a dream fed by likes, comments, and reels that she can't see the value of real love staring her in the face. And if you're not grounded, you'll start doubting your worth based on a game that was rigged from the start. You can't save her from the fantasy she doesn't even know she's living in. That's the hard truth most men don't want to accept. You can pour your heart out, prove your loyalty, offer her stability, and still watch her drift further into a world where feelings outrank facts and illusions feel safer than reality. You could be everything a good man should be: honest, consistent, patient, and still find yourself discarded when her emotions shift. Not because you failed, but because her inner world changed and she no longer felt the same. And in her reality, feelings are truth, even if they're fleeting. That's why your job isn't to convince her or try to wake her up, it's to protect yourself. You do that by staying grounded in who you are. You watch what she does, not what she says. You stop chasing the version of her that only existed in the beginning and start observing who she becomes when things aren't perfect. You lead with clarity, not performance. And when she tests you, and she will, you don't flinch. Because the more solid you are, the more she'll poke, prod, and stir up emotion just to see if you'll lose your frame. If you break under pressure, she loses respect. But if you hold your ground with calm strength, she either rises to meet you or leaves. Either way, you win. The right woman will eventually realize that chaos doesn't lead to love, it destroys it. And when she does, she'll look for the man who never wavered. That's your power, not in being reactive, not in trying to fix her emotional storms, but in being the steady force that doesn't get pulled into them. Because a man who remains rooted in truth becomes a lighthouse, and those lost in emotional tides will either find him or crash trying. Before you ever let a woman into your life, you must first build your own world, a world that doesn't sway with someone else's feelings, a world anchored in values, discipline, and self-respect. Too many men invite women into their lives before they've established their foundation, and then wonder why everything crumbles when she brings confusion or emotional chaos. But when you've built something solid, you no longer bend to fit her shifting moods or ever-changing expectations. You no longer tolerate behavior that disrespects your peace or undermines your standards. You evaluate her not by how she behaves when things are easy, but by how she acts when things get tough, when she's challenged, when she's frustrated, when she doesn't get her way. Does she still show respect? Does she bring stability? or drama, growth, or distraction? The answers to those questions reveal everything. Because most women don't want to lead emotionally, they only step into that role when the man they're with refuses to lead. But leadership isn't control. It's clarity. It's holding steady when everything else feels shaky. It's saying, "This is what I value. This is where I'm headed. And if you want to come with me, it has to be with respect and alignment." That kind of strength is rare, and it intimidates women who are still trapped in fantasy. But 2. The woman who's finally tired of chasing emotional highs. It's everything she never knew she needed. She'll come looking not because you begged or performed, but because you didn't. You didn't abandon your standards. You didn't sacrifice your self-respect for temporary connection. You stayed rooted. And when she sees that you can give her the one thing her fantasy never could, real love with real stability, she'll either rise to meet you or walk away. Either way, you remain unshaken.